Week 4 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few tight ends I looked at off the wire this week. The first tight end, Chig Okonkwo of the Tennessee Titans. Okonkwo out there in tons of fantasy leagues right now in 69%. So the first few weeks he didn't do much. Week 1 at Denver, 3 catches, 19 yards, 4 targets. Week 2 versus the Rams, 4 catches, 35 yards. And week 3 versus the Colts, his best game of the year, 5 catches, 66 yards on 6 targets. Okonkwo, a few years ago, we saw he had a decent season. And now the last couple of years, he hasn't done much. But Cam Ward, he's getting more comfortable in this offense, entering his third game, even though they still got blown out by the Indianapolis Colts. And I always say in my videos, a young quarterback security blanket and best friend at times is a tight end position, a guy you can count on in the red zone and on key third down. So Okonkwo in an offense where they're going to be trailing early and often all season long and chasing points. And this week at Houston, I think they'll be chasing as well. Okonkwo, like I said, he's a tight end that could go out there, make plays, and a decent route runner, and he's a matchup problem for defenses. I think this week he's a decent hit off the wall. Your next tight end, Brenton Strange of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Brenton Strange, obviously they let Evan Ingram go, and he's been the starter now this season. And we saw some flashes last year from Strange. Right now he's out there in 75% of fantasy leagues. Week 1 versus the Panthers, 4 catches, 59 yards. Week 2 with the Bengals, a down game, 3 catches, 17 yards. And then week 3 versus the Texans, a nice game, 6 catches, 61 yards on 7 targets. So Brian Thomas Jr., Travis Hunter, they haven't done nothing in this offense. For this season, Brenton Strange has been more consistent than Brian Thomas Jr. in terms of targets and yards. Travis Hunter this season. So Strange right now, he's stepping up, he's making plays. And also him and Trevor Lawrence have had a decent rapport going back to a little bit of last season. So if you need help with the tight end position, like I said, he's a decent ad this week, available in 75% of leagues. Next tight end, Dalton Schultz of the Houston Texans. So Houston, they're looking for another guy to step up and be a number 2 playmaker in the receiving game. And Dalton Schultz, we know he's had some solid years going back to his Cowboy days and the first year with this Texan team. So on the year for Schultz, not great numbers, obviously. Week 1 at the Rams, 3 catches, 28 yards. Week 2 versus Tampa, 3 catches, 29 yards. And week 3 at Jacksonville, 5 catches, 39 yards. So the thing for Schultz, 2 of the 3 games, he had 5 or more targets, out there in 81% of fantasy leagues. And like I said, no one's really stepped up in this Texan offense as the number 2 option behind Nico Collins. I know Christian Kirk, he returned in week 3's game, but he didn't do much in that one, even though he got peppered with 8 targets. And Dalton Schultz, I still think he's a tight end that could go out there. He could give linebackers a problem, safeties who cover him, and he's a decent red zone threat and a good yard after catch tight end. Got to put him in better position. But like I said, week 3 was his best game of the year. Maybe builds off that with a good matchup in week 4 versus Tennessee. Next tight end, Cole Kmet of the Chicago Bears. So rookie Colston Loveland went down with a hip injury and left in week 3 versus the Dallas Cowboys. And Cole Kmet, he was the backup where they took Colston Loveland as a top 10 pick in the NFL draft this season. And Kmet this season as a backup obviously hasn't done much. Week 1 versus Minnesota, catch 31 yards. Week 2 with the Lions, 2 catches, 29 yards. And then week 3 versus Dallas, 1 catch, 10 yards, and found the end zone. So like I said, Caleb Williams and Kmet had some decent rapport last season. A young quarterback as well as Caleb Williams, obviously. You're going to rely on the tight end at times. In week 4, good matchup with the Vegas Raiders, a defense that can't stop anyone. And now if Colston Loveland misses time with the hip injury, those snaps at the tight end position obviously going to go to Cole Kmet majority of the time with Loveland out of the lineup. So with those factors, and he did find the end zone, like I said, versus the Dallas Cowboys in week 4. I think Kmet in deeper leagues is a good ad, available in 98% of fantasy leagues. Final tight end I looked at off the Warriors, Oronde Gaddison of the Los Angeles Chargers. Gaddison, he came out of nowhere, and he had a solid ball game, I thought. 5 catches, 46 yards on 7 targets versus the Broncos. I know Tyler Conklin's there, Will Disley's there. Been the best performance from the tight end position this season from this Los Angeles Chargers. So the first 2 weeks he didn't see the field was Gaddison, and then 5 for 46 on the 7 targets. So like I said, with veterans like with Disley out in week 3 with the knee injury, and Tyler Conklin hasn't done much, only 2 targets in the week 3 ball game. Gaddison stepped up and he had a good ball game. So I know it's a one decent ball game. I know if Disley comes back next week, he's going to be inactive with a 3rd tight end on the active roster for the week. But anytime someone goes out there and he's a decent ball game, especially in an offense like the Chargers, with Justin Herbert's that quarterback that spreads the football out, it gains my attention a little bit. So right now in deeper leagues, if you want to take a shot on Gaddison, he's out there everywhere in 99% of fantasy leagues. That's a few tight ends I looked at off the wire for week 4 of the fantasy football season.